So you're probably thinking, what is this series? Well, Daryl Recommends Podcast was originally a series I had made for TikTok. I would recommend shows to people in hopes that people who are looking for a new podcast to listen to would want to give it a listen. Daryl Recommends Podcast so far has almost 20 episodes on TikTok, but recently I decided to move it to YouTube, mostly because I have a wider audience on YouTube, and a lot of people on TikTok follow me already for podcast content, so I would like to move it to YouTube and possibly get people who are interested in starting to listen to podcasts a good, decent place to start. Also, just people who are listening to podcasts and want a new show to listen to. Maybe I got you covered, maybe I don't. Who knows? So, and I feel like I could also make better videos on YouTube than on TikTok. TikTok has a 3-minute recording limit, and I feel like I don't give enough information about shows to get people interested in them. And the recommendation videos for more popular podcasts that I have made tend to do better than the ones that I hope people would listen to, which are smaller, lesser-known indie shows. Because of that, I'm going to be starting off this series with either focusing on just indie shows or smaller indie shows, or podcasts I have not recommended yet. I just want everybody to kind of know that, so when you're giving suggestions, there's a good chance I've done that for my series on YouTube, on TikTok. Sorry about that. And I will be making videos, remaking the ones that are on TikTok for YouTube that will hopefully be a bit more descriptive and a bit more convincing. Now, before we get with today's and our very first episode of Daryl Recommends Podcast, I just want everybody to know that this is a series based off of my thoughts and my opinions. Don't take it word to heart. If the show still interests you, but I'm not being convincing enough, I do recommend you go listen to it. You never know. Maybe you'll like a show a lot more than I did. Maybe not. I also want to give a big shout out to Blue Skies on Tumblr for helping me out with bits of this episode. I really appreciate that. So without further ado, I give you the very first episode of Daryl Recommends Podcasts.
Where am I? What's happened?
Don't you remember?
Who are you?
Who am I? I'm a friend. The best friend you have right now. The only friend you have right
now. What happened? Why can't I see anything?
I know.
What do you mean, you know? Who are you?
Relax.
Arkham private investigator Arthur Lester wakes up in his apartment with no memories of how he got there, and a voice in his head claiming to have control of his eyes. On the run from cops, monsters, and cultists alike, the both of them now search for answers to what circumstances brought them together in the first place. Malevolent is a horror podcast created by Harlan Guthrie, who asked the question, how much fan art of a guy holding his own hand can someone get people to draw? Well, oh boy, do I have an answer for you. Malevolent is based off of Lovecraftian mythos and dives into eldritch horror through the descriptions given to us and Arthur from the entity Arthur is now bound to. I really enjoyed this podcast quite a bit, especially if you follow my Tumblr recently. I've been talking about it almost as much as I talk about the Magnus archives. What's really nice about Malevolent is that the show kind of feels a lot like a D&D game. And there's like an RPG nature with Malevolent that is kind of played between Harlan Guthrie and his Patreon. On his Patreon, he would go and set up a poll with giving the listeners a different set of options. Listeners choose the options, and they dictate the path that Arthur and the entity go through in the next chapter of the show. Chapters are given out weekly on the Patreon, while for the rest of us, we have to wait monthly. But you know, the wait is worth it because this is a really well-written show. Like I said, it kind of feels a lot like a D&D game. Sometimes whenever Arthur or the entity is looking at something, searching for something, or notice something, you can kind of hear the sound of dice rolling in the background. I've heard a lot of comparisons with the show with the relationship between Venom and Eddie Brock in the Venom series. However, I don't really feel a lot like it feels like a lot like Venom. If anything, it reminds me more of the more bizarre and psychological stories from the SCP universe, mainly with the stuff with the Scarlet King and the Hanged King. But because I don't actually go seeking out Lovecraftian lore myself, and most of my knowledge is from this show or from the fan base of the show, I don't know how accurate that would be as a comparison. but that's generally just the kind of vibe I get from it, because those are the stories I most enjoy in the SCP universe. So when it starts going more into the deeper lore of Malevolent, that's kind of where my mind goes to. As I said before, Malevolent is a really well-written show. It hits some really great emotional arcs between Arthur and the Entity, and it has such a great storyline with the development between these two characters. One of the cooler aspects about the show is the fact that every single character is voiced by Harlan Guthrie himself, and not only that, but he does such an amazing job at making everybody sound completely different from each other. Never really once have I seen two major characters in a room with each other who sound exactly alike. The voice acting is just amazing, and the fact that everybody is voiced by one guy is astounding. And he does such a good job at hitting these amazing emotional beats between John and Arthur, and going into just in depth with some like serious character motivations. He just does a really good job with going in and writing these very emotional conversations between John and Arthur. And although this show does not have any very explicit queer rep, which I know is really important for a lot of people who listen to podcasts, Arthur and John's relationship feels very reminiscent of a queer platonic relationship. And that's one of the things that I like about it, is that it doesn't focus so much on like a romantic story, but rather a more platonic one. And I feel like the story is a bit stronger for that. Then again, I'm also not a big shipping person. I don't go into shows looking for a romantic relationship to ship. But as much as I like making jokes about the PI falling in love with the Eldritch Horror, I kind of prefer just the way the story is written currently. Also, just the fact that the show not only has like amazing writing, but a really good soundtrack for it. A lot of the music is done really nice, and it knows how to build suspense using sound, and it has a lot of really great foley. However, the sound foley might be a bit too good. Whereas Malevolent does have general warnings for violence, gore, and body horror, because the show has a lot of violence, gore, and body horror, so be warned if you're not into that. It does fail to have individual content warnings for some stuff, such as misophonia and emetophobia. So if you're sensitive to sounds of vomiting and certain noises, I would be careful going into the show. I know I have heard comments from a lot of people on my own art talking about how it's very hard for them to listen to the show because of the filter on the entity's voice. But if that stuff doesn't bother you, then I say go for it. I'm a very big horror person, and gore and violence doesn't really bother me that much. However, there's very few things in the show that have actually made it hard for me to listen to, more so with the misophonia warnings. But that's because I personally feel like the show definitely needs some individual episode content warnings, as the general warnings are fine for the most part because there is a lot of violence, gore, and body horror in the show. There are also some contents that they don't really warn you about beforehand. So that's honestly my only complaint about the show. Like, my own personal, complaint about the show. I really enjoy Malevolent, and I really hope that a lot of people will give it a chance. The writing of the show and the emotional moments, like I say, are really good. Harlan does a great job with building this relationship between Arthur and John, despite the fact that it's kind of a symbiotic relationship that neither of them really consented to. And it starts off with this building up of trust and not really kind of getting there completely all the time. Lots of manipulation from John's end with trying to get control of Arthur's body, figure out who he is, what he is, and then developing into his own person and deciding that what he originally was before he became bounded to Arthur is not what he wants to be anymore. And I really find it interesting that it's kind of written like that, because they could have easily have just made it very die and ride with each other as soon as the first season ended, like it kind of seemed to have been. But however, I like the fact that their relationship is more gray with each other, that sometimes they have these moments where, although the two of them love and care for each other so much, they both end up being really shitty to each other regardless, and then we see them move past that and try to fix that later on. And comparing the original episodes from early season 1 to the later episodes of season 3, you definitely see that development a lot with how they interact with each other. and it's just done really, really well. Currently, there's 3 seasons of the show and like 1 small bonus episode at the time of me recording this, so you got a good 3 seasons to listen to. And because that takes such a long time for 1 episode to come out, if you're not in the Patreon, it gives you plenty of time to catch up before it. When I first gave the show my first listen, I took a month. I had just started listening to it right after episode 24 came out, and I caught up, I think, like a day or 2 before episode 25 came out. So, plenty of time. Episodes are anywhere between half an hour to an hour long. There's like a couple episodes that go over the 1 hour limit, but not by much. So, if you want a very good, well-written, long-ish, fictional podcast to listen to, this is definitely the one to go with. Also, I could just sit and talk about Kane for hours. I've ranted to my friend about Kane for hours. He's my favorite character in the show. He's like the most useless hype man I have ever seen. I love his like little moments where he's kind of breaking the fourth wall. Just best character in the show. So anyway, I hope you guys will give Malevolent a chance and go give it a listen. And if you're very interested in Malevolent and you want to be a part of the Patreon, I will also link that down below. If you also have ideas for shows that I could listen to and give reviews about, go ahead and leave those in the comments as well. I will take a listen to those, or at least read them, or it'll probably be a show I already listened to. You never know. I also have my links to my socials in the description of this video, so I hope you guys have a good day. Go give Malevolent a listen, and I will see you in the next one.